Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Box3Cast. I'm Justin,
And I'm Mikko.
and today we'll be discussing the recent preseason tests of Formula One in Bahrain and also the upcoming race in Melbourne for the inaugural start of the season here for 2014. Very exciting, and we're going to be going over the teams, and we're going to be discussing their results at the Bahrain test. As little as that might mean. And we're also going to be discussing how we think they might fare in Australia, possibly even later in the season as well. And then we are going to be giving our predictions for the race. It's certainly a tough one to predict, probably one of the toughest races to predict in recent years. But we're going to give it a shot at the end of the race, or excuse me, of the Boxcast. So first team that we're going to talk about is Caterham. Now, actually, the first thing I wanted to bring up with Caterham, they're supposedly going to have a different front nose for Australia, correct? Have you heard that as well?
Yeah, I heard that as well. I think they're going for the twin tusk style.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been on the F1 show, possibly. I think that might have been Ted Kravitz that provided that information to everyone. But yeah, so they're going to be getting rid of their. I don't even know the words that can be used to describe what that nose looks like. But they're going to be getting rid of that horrible front end. And they are reasonably reliable compared to at least the other Renault teams. In Bahrain specifically, let's see, Kamui did 676 kilometers. And Marcus Ericsson did 930 kilometers, so together they did about 1,600 kilometers, which was smack dab in the middle, actually. They were 6th out of 11 as far as the amount of kilometers completed in the Bahrain tests. Let's see. Oh, no, actually, that was just for test 3 specifically that I'm looking at. But they're doing pretty well reliability-wise, better than certainly other Renault teams. Obviously, we've all heard about the struggles from Toro Rosso and Red Bull as well. Lotus have certainly been having a tough time of things as well.
Yep.
But it looks like Caterham, this might be, and we've already discussed this, but this might be an excellent chance for them to sneak some points at this first race in Australia, especially if it's gonna be wet. That's just gonna throw even more question marks into the air, and could possibly land themselves in the top 10.
Yeah, for those teams that are suffering from overheating, especially Red Bull, I believe that the rain would suit them just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to bring the temperature down, certainly, and with the cloud cover, of course, that'll mean less direct sunlight on the cars themselves as well. So yeah, that'll certainly be helpful for the Renault teams if it is in fact going to rain. Let me see, what was the temperature? I think it was, only 16 degrees Celsius is what they're predicting for Sunday on race day. So that's certainly a lot colder than it's going to be on Friday, Saturday, where it's going to be close to 30 degrees Celsius. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That could prove to be a big help to the Renault teams who are struggling with overheating issues. Certainly, I expect Kamui to be the performer on that team, at least in the opening races. It's tough for anybody in their first few races in F1. I certainly remember Esteban Gutierrez, his first few races last year, just really struggling. And so I would expect something similar from Marcus Ericsson. I imagine he'll be struggling a little bit. Hopefully he'll have a little bit of a Max Chilton sort of attitude and really just focus on finishing the race more than anything else. So I expect Kamui will be the one that's actually on the attack, and Marcus will probably just be sitting back and taking it easy and just trying to finish the race.
What do you think? Which one is going to be on the top, Marussia or Caterham?
In Australia, that's a really tough one.
I'd say Marussia, actually.
I'm going to have to go with Marussia as well, purely because of the Ferrari power plant. I think the Ferrari power plant is at least more reliable. We've heard that it's a lot thirstier. Fuel consumption might be an issue for the Marussia, but dialing back your engine is nothing compared to just DNFing the race. So I have a feeling that Marussia will probably come out ahead in the battle between the back markers in Australia. Hopefully they won't be, hopefully they'll be a little bit closer to the rest of the pack, and they won't be as much of back markers as they have been previously. But certainly I expect with their small budgets they're going to have at least a difficult time keeping up with the higher end teams. But yeah, I think Marussia is probably the right choice out of those two.
Yeah, what do we think about Marussia in general? How did they do in the second part of the testing?
Let's see. For the last 4 days of testing, we got Jules Bianchi with 828 kilometers. Actually, that's a lot of kilometers, and Max Chilton with only 568. So they were towards the bottom, but not by loads. They were still above 1,000 kilometers at least. In the final test, Red Bull and Lotus were the only teams that failed to complete at least 1,000 kilometers. A few teams completed over 2,000 kilometers in the final test there. So. They're definitely they don't have as much testing done as Caterham. Let me take a look at the complete totals. Yeah, for the entire preseason, Caterham at 3,300 kilometers, Marussia at 1,600 kilometers. Of course, they missed some of Jerez, but this means that they're at about half of the mileage that Caterham have put out. But again, I think that the power plant is really going to be what makes the difference. You can get as much experience as you want, but if your car breaks down before the end of the race, then that's certainly a problem.
And it's gonna be like a make it or break it situation for both of those teams to score their first points in F1. It's gonna be a big deal if they do so.
Yeah, absolutely, and
it's
it
gonna
would
be their best chance.
And it would be a big deal if they failed to do so as well. So yeah, you're exactly right. This is definitely a make it or break it type scenario, and I'm hoping at least one of them can do it. I when I first started watching F1 again in 2012, Marussia and Caterham weren't even really on my radar. But eventually, when you fall in love with the sport enough, you kind of start rooting for everybody. I don't necessarily want to see anybody especially failing to even score points. So I'm really rooting for both teams, honestly, and just really hoping they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get into the fight. It's not an easy thing to do, and they should be commended for sticking with it as long as they have and getting as close as they have. I believe both teams have gotten as high as 12th, which is really not far off the points. So hopefully this is the year. This is probably their best chance. So hopefully this is the year that they can actually do that finally.
Yep, and all the exciting news this week or the previous week, probably the most exciting thing was the Martini launch of Williams.
Yeah, really liking the livery a lot. Certainly, I'm familiar with the old Martini livery from the older cars. I wasn't expecting so much white in this new livery, and I'm not sure how finalized everything is. It didn't seem to have a load of sponsors on the car at the unveiling, so I think there's still some sponsorships that need to be put onto the car, which will kind of clutter it up a little bit more. But there was quite a lot of white. It was a very white car, a lot of white going on. But really beautiful. I think it's a lot more striking, a lot more eye-catching than the previous Williams livery from last year and years past.
Yeah, I really like it. Like the new livery, and although it doesn't have like the stripes, the Martini stripes, they're not too big. They're actually pretty small in the end.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of the late 90s Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Cars. I don't know if you remember those, but they had
vaguely.
this. Yeah, they were basically white, and they had like this kind of Scottish type stripe on them, which kind of is the same color scheme of the Martini colors.
Yeah, I really like it. I like the whole, all the new uniforms that they've got for the driver and the pit crews and all that stuff.
It's very
Uh,
old school.
yeah, it's fantastic. I really it's like a throwback, and it's a perfect time for them to do that too. Between signing Felipe Massa, switching to Mercedes, getting Pat Simmons and some other people on board, this is sort of like a revolution for Williams, and I think that's the perfect time to launch the Martini livery, and I think it's getting people really excited for Williams too. It's generating a lot of hype, not just among the other teams and stuff like that, but among F1 fans in general. People who may have shied away from Williams a little bit in the past are going to be supporting Williams more than they have recently. And it's because of the multiple reasons. Again, it's not just because of the paint job, but all of these things combined. Add on to that the fact that Felipe Massa had the number one fastest time in Bahrain at the end of the tests. I think things are looking really good for Williams.
I think everybody is expecting pretty good things from them on this season. While they have the upper hand, at least now at the first part of the season, of course the bigger teams are gonna play more of a catch-up role during the season. But we'll see what their pace is gonna be like in the first race. But I think a lot of people are expecting big things for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And in their defense, you can't really get much worse than they did last season.
Yeah.
They're kind of in the same boat as McLaren in that sense. Just about any result would be better than the results that they got last year. So really, they can only go up. But I mean, things really are looking fantastic. And Felipe Massa seems already to be, right at home at Williams. And right, they're bringing Rob Smedley as well, which is fantastic to see. Want to mention again, I predicted both of those guys going to Williams, so excuse me while I take some credit for that. But
the
yeah,
romance continues.
they are probably the best relationship in professional Formula One. In my opinion, those guys are great, and it's really great that they're going to continue working together. I don't think we discussed this before already. Do you know off the top of your head? Sorry to put you on the spot. Do you know if Massa signed a multi-year deal or was this a one-year deal with Williams?
I don't know if they released that information.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about the length of the contract.
Yeah, I'm not remembering anything, but
I suspect 1 year plus maybe an option for a second.
Right, yeah. Or it's a multi-year with a clause, with a some sort of performance clause.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, those seem to be pretty popular in F1. So yeah, probably something like that. But I really have high hopes for Williams. I think Bottas is going to do well as well. I believe they have the shortest and possibly lightest weight team on the grid, so they have a little bit of an advantage there. And yeah, it's a good combo. It's kind of like the combo McLaren tried last year. They got the one really veteran, experienced driver, and then they got the young, new, fast guy. I guess you could compare it to McLaren this year, actually. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I don't think I could make this prediction, so I'm going to ask you, who do you think is going to come out on top out of the two Williams in Australia?
I have to say Bottas.
Massa hasn't done well there historically.
Yeah, historically he's not been great at Australia, and we know Bottas is a good wet weather driver.
Yes, he proved this in Canada last year. So, yeah, the fact that it is very likely to rain on Sunday, this coming Sunday. Wow, it's hard getting used to saying that. This coming Sunday, when the race happens, that rain could help Bottas significantly, especially in the new Mercedes-powered Williams. And I can't help but feel the car goes a little bit faster when it looks that sexy with the Martini livery.
Yeah, when a car looks fast or looks beautiful, it tends to go a little bit faster, I think.
Absolutely. And I'd also like to mention that I really liked Susie Wolf in the Martini livery pictures too. That was a nice photo shoot for anybody that missed it. All right, so moving on from Williams, well, actually, let's briefly talk about Williams and their final test. The the preseason testing stuff. They ended up as the team with the second most mileage, with 4,893 kilometers, almost 5,000 kilometers done for the whole of testing. Again, Felipe Massa was fastest overall with a 133.2. Valtteri Bottas had a 133.9. He was fourth fastest in the end. They're looking similarly paced. Bottas was actually the driver who completed the most laps at this final Bahrain test not too long ago. He completed 236 laps total, 1,200 kilometers just in that 4-day session. Obviously, he didn't drive all 4 days even, so great job by the team and him to put up that many laps. I mean, that's like 4 race distances in a 4-day period. So just fantastic from them, and again, looking very strong and reliable.
I think during the whole testing preseason, I think they broke down on the track that they had to retrieve the car from the track, I think only once. So kilometers per breakdown they're on top at this moment.
Nice. Interesting. That's a very interesting fact to know about, actually. And with times as fast as they are, I mean, you really, I mean, times don't quote unquote matter in preseason testing, but certainly in the final days of testing, I can guarantee you that the teams were pushing for speed, not necessarily for reliability. Jerez, the first Bahrain test, they're looking at reliability, just pumping in laps, learning about the car. In the final days of testing, though, they're almost certainly turning the engine up to 100% boost, and they're just telling them to go for the fastest lap times. So as much as they didn't matter at the beginning of the tests, they still don't matter now, but they matter a little bit more, because definitely the teams were pushing for fast lap times. So I think it's looking really, really good for Williams.
Yeah.
Next
right,
is Toro Rosso. How are we doing on Toro Rosso?
Really hard to say. Cautiously optimistic, or I mean, it's so hard to say. I mean, I think there was some kind of little news of that Red Bull is asking Toro Rosso for help in some part of the, I don't know if
interesting
it's due to something in the electronics or something.
Yeah.
That they were asking help from Toro Rosso, but I think that's just a rumor. But still terribly unreliable.
Yep.
Looking. I'm surprised if they're gonna be anywhere near the top 10.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be struggling at the beginning of the year, certainly. They're one of those Renault teams that are in the unfortunate position of being at the start of 2014 with a Renault engine. Daniil Kvyat for the entire preseason testing, 1,100 kilometers. Jean-Eric Vergne, 1,300 kilometers. Grand total just under 2,500 kilometers. They ended up actually about 800 kilometers off of Caterham even. And let's see what their times were looking like. Let's see. Jean-Eric Vergne was 9th fastest in the end in Bahrain with a 135.7. Daniil Kvyat with a 136.1. I mean, yeah, they're not far off of right around where Daniel Ricciardo was for Red Bull. I mean, there are no Renault teams though in the top 8 as far as the times are concerned. So, but as you mentioned, terrible reliability issues. They might be slightly more reliable than their big sister team, but I don't think any Renault team is going into Australia super confident about their chances of finishing with both cars.
Yeah, not really. I'm expecting good things from Kvyat, but the times at the moment not looking very good. Although I have to say, I don't think they were concentrating too much on the speed during the tests, because they did have so much problems with the reliability still. So
certainly
it's gonna be I don't know how we would say it, but like a true test would be
Yeah,
Australia for them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, they might even be going into Australia just looking to learn more.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if certain teams, Toro Rosso potentially being one of those teams, I wouldn't be surprised if certain teams are actually just kind of writing off Australia right off the bat. Just go in there saying, right, we're not going to do well here. Let's learn everything we can. Let's test as much as we can, throw on some new parts, see how they do, so on and so forth. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Certainly, I don't have any insider information that any team is actually going to be doing that, but you got to have realistic expectations. Certainly, we'll know more once Free Practice 1 and Free Practice 2 are running and all that kind of stuff. We'll get a little bit better of an idea of how the cars are running. Again, Friday it's going to be very hot though, so we may see more reliability issues during practice than we actually do during the race.
Yeah, of course the rain might shake things up a little bit if the bodywork is starting to leak a bit, water gets into the electronics.
Yeah, with the new brake-by-wire system and
Yeah.
all of that stuff, yeah, the water could play a hazard actually for the teams as well. Um, yeah, I'm not so confident in Toro Rosso certainly.
No.
I don't think they're gonna necessarily drop down to Marusha Caterham level, but things aren't looking really great. Um, Yeah, hopefully they can bring it around. They have been bringing updates. They brought an even bigger front nose for their car, which I didn't even know was possible. But yeah, they brought this kind of longer nose with a little bit. It's almost like it has eyebrows on it. It kind of has like a dip where, if you picture it like
Yeah.
a forehead, like the crown of your forehead, it's got a dip down in there. So they are bringing updates. They're working on the car. And again, they did actually put in more laps than Red Bull did, and Lotus as well. So they're probably in a little bit better of a position than some other Renault teams, but certainly they're gonna have a hard time. They're gonna be struggling a little bit.
Yeah, and next team, Sauber, Ferrari engine, of course. Uh, let's have a look at the times. Adrian Sutil, 13th fastest. Esteban Gutierrez, 17th fastest, right around 3 or 4 seconds of Felipe Massa's top time.
Yeah.
But, cautiously optimistic on reliability. Gutierrez, 6th most laps. Adrian Sutil, not far off. Just maybe.
Yeah, ninth most laps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for just the final Bahrain test, they were actually I don't want to say reliable, but they did the third most laps. They were one of the 3 teams to break 2,000 kilometers for the final test in Bahrain. 373 laps total for the 2 drivers. Obviously, every team broke down at some point. There wasn't a single team that didn't break down. Adrian Sutil seemed a little peeved about their reliability, though, in some of the interviews that he was giving. He did seem a little maybe frustrated, annoyed. I mean, I assume a lot of the drivers are feeling that way, though. They don't really pay attention to each other, so they might not even notice how little the other people are running as well. But Sutil seemed a little peeved about how little running they got. Again, they're on that Ferrari power plant, like you mentioned, which seems good. But at the same time, people have been discussing how it might have problems with fuel consumption. So certainly they're going to struggle in the race if they're having to do a lot of fuel saving. One thing I've been wondering about that I didn't get a chance to look up, but I know that Ferrari has an extra strong turbo housing, so that they don't need the blast plate on the bodywork above it. And I've been wondering recently if Sauber got the same extra strong turbo housing as Ferrari did, because supposedly that provides a lower center of gravity. And that could be beneficial for Sauber. I'm not sure. I would assume that the turbo housing is part of the power plant, so I would assume that comes with it. But maybe that's something that some of the listeners here can can fill me in on. But yeah, cautiously optimistic, I think, yeah, is a great way of describing Sauber. I'm not a huge Sutil fan. I'm not a huge Gutierrez fan either. They're certainly both talented drivers, but I gotta say personally, I feel like this is the weakest lineup that Sauber has had in a while.
Yeah, certainly after Hulkenberg left the team, but yeah, in terms of reliability, if you look at the kilometers, they had fifth most. Sauber had fifth most kilometers at 4,000 kilometers. So that's not bad per se, but I think they broke down quite a lot, at least in Jerez and the first Bahrain test. But in terms of kilometers, they're looking pretty okay.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's going to be super important for people to just finish the race, regardless of how fast they do it. So, and Sutil actually performed quite well last year in Australia. If you remember, he led the race for quite some time, and he was a little bit of a pest for some of the front runners. I believe Sebastian Vettel specifically had a hard time getting around Sutil last year in Australia. So it could be a race that he sort of specializes at, or just a track that he really enjoys. But specifically in Australia, I would expect Sutil to be the higher finisher of the two Sauber boys.
Yeah, yes, I expect so as well. Yeah.
Yeah.